Russia has carried out another major attack on Kyiv. Ukraine's president called the early morning barrage one of the largest ballistic missile assaults of the war on the Ukrainian capital. At least one person was killed and more than a dozen were injured. The barrage comes as Ukraine expands its air assault campaign, striking warehouses belonging to Russia's largest online retailer.
Firefighters battle a large warehouse blaze in Kyiv on Sunday, following a blistering overnight attack on the capital city. Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched more than 40 missiles and 125 drones in its pre-dawn attack, sparking fires and damaging residential buildings, offices, and industrial sites. Municipal workers and volunteers clear the rubble in this Kyiv neighborhood right next to a fruit stand. The juxtaposition of scenes, part of daily life in Kyiv, a resilience born out of necessity.
Kyiv will flourish again. Those idiots keep destroying everything. But we'll rebuild it all. Make it like new, and everything will be all right.
Ukraine is expanding its own military campaign, using drones to hit Russian ships in the Black and Azov Seas. Vessels, it says, are part of a shadow fleet evading international sanctions. And over the weekend, it struck two warehouses belonging to Russia's biggest online retailer, Wildberries, one near Moscow and the other about 500 kilometers southeast of the Russian capital in the Tambov region. At least 9 people were killed and dozens more injured. Tambov's regional governor visited the injured in hospital, including this man, a security guard at the warehouse, who told local media what it was like when the drone hit.
We were about to let people out, but herded them back inside because there was shelling right near the fire exit. The shelling was close by. We got everyone back inside, and that's when it happened. The impact blew out the doors and windows. Everything went flying. Everyone nearby got hit.
Ukraine's president says the strikes are justified.
These were elements of Russian logistics, including warehouses supplying equipment for the war, navigation systems, components for drone production, and other supplies for the Russian military.
Zelenskyy added that Ukraine will continue to expand its middle and long-range strike capabilities, part of Kyiv's evolving strategy to bring the war to Russia's doorstep.
All right, let's go to Kyiv now, and DW correspondent Nick Connolly is standing by for us. Nick, good to see you again. So you're at a protest in support of the dismissed Defence Minister Mikhailo Fyodorov. Now, his supporters say he was a very effective minister, and after last night's massive ballistic assault, what have people there been saying to you?
There are certainly lots of tired faces here at this protest. We are still 2 hours before the official start of this protest, so people are still coming in, still pretty small in terms of numbers. But when you talk to people here, the main thing they kind of focus on is, as grim as it went on for hours last night, it was certainly very, very loud. You didn't have quite the same number of mass casualty events that we've seen in recent weeks, where kind of entire residential buildings have been basically reduced to rubble with tens of people losing their lives. That didn't happen last night. There was a bit of positive kind of news from the Ukrainian military in terms of interceptions. We've had attacks in recent weeks where not a single ballistic missile has been intercepted. That was a bit different last night, although the faster, most kind of dangerous Zircon missiles all got through. So there is a kind of mixed feeling and a kind of sense of routine. If you look behind me, people have basically turned this square into a kind of protest camp with their placards, people drawing their own signs, people bring their dogs, their kids. So there's a sense that, as kind of exhausted as people might be, this is not going to end anytime soon, and this is kind of becoming a bit of a routine.
Yeah, now, is there any realistic chance that President Volodymyr Zelenskyy could reverse the decision to, with regards to this dismissal?
So we've heard from Zelenskyy that he is talking to top commanders, and there is a sense that maybe these are kind of interviews for a potential replacement for Syrsky, who is the head of the military, who is kind of credited with getting rid of Fyodorov. Let's go and talk to some protesters we spoke to earlier, Alexandra and Anton, who are going to tell us about why they came here and what they think these protests can actually achieve, if this is actually going to achieve anything. Hi, I wanted to ask you, do you think that these protests can actually bring Fyodorov back? Is that a realistic hope?
I believe so, because it helped a year ago, and we live in a democracy and they should listen to those protests. So I believe if people still come here and voice their opinions, maybe it won't be Fedorov, but it would be another person. And it's not about the Minister of Defense, because we don't have Minister of Foreign Affairs right now as well, which is really important while we are in the war state. And in general, people just are fed up. They got hope under Minister Fedorov, and now they have been taken this hope away because we don't have transparency why this happened and what will happen in future. More and more we hear about some atrocities happening in the army, and people are worried not about the reform of the mobilization, but what happens after people are mobilized. So yes, I believe people are so fed up that they will be coming here and they will hear us.
So that was a sense you got there in terms of the mood here. It is not a kind of quick one time coming out and everything changes, but there is a sense that this is something that people are going to carry on continuing to.
Yeah, very interesting hearing that there, Nick. Now, President Zelenskyy says Ukraine urgently needs more air defence interceptors. So how serious is the shortage?
Well, Pablo, when you look at some of the kind of recent news, when you had European ministers looking desperately to find Patriot interceptors anywhere in Europe, and they were talking about single figures or even low dozens at best to try and help Ukraine in a rush before those deliveries from the US come, that shows you quite how basically run down the stocks are. And if you have an attack like last night with about 30, 40 Russian ballistic missiles, if you're trying to do it kind of safely, you need at least 2 interceptors for every missile incoming. So that is way more needed in one single night than Europe is trying to kind of muster right now. So it is a chronic problem, and that's why we're seeing Ukraine and other European countries trying to come up with a cheaper, easily scalable solution, because Patriots just aren't being produced in the numbers needed to give Ukraine, let alone the rest of Europe, any kind of security.
Now, meanwhile, Ukraine has stepped up drone strikes inside Russia. We saw how they destroyed 2 huge warehouses belonging to the online retailer Wildberries. So how much impact are those attacks having then?
Well, there's a sense here that this is kind of a retaliation for Russian attacks on Ukrainian logistics. We've seen kind of Nova Poshta, which is Ukraine's big kind of postal operator, lots of casualties, repeated attacks there. That's the kind of official line. There are kind of question marks about whether that actually helps Ukraine's cause, if it's going to make Russian civilians kind of more invested in this war, if they feel like their everyday life is being impacted. I'm not sure that really is something people care about too much here. But certainly there is a sense here that these, long-range drones that Minister Fedorov was kind of instrumental in scaling up are actually now having an impact on Russians' everyday lives in a way that kind of, even a few months ago, I think people didn't really expect, and is actually going to show the price of this war here in Ukraine to people wherever they are in Russia, even if they're not just on the front lines.
All right, Nick, we'll leave it there. Great to get that update from Kyiv. DW's correspondent in Kyiv, Nick Connolly.